for people who aren't aware, because the listener base of this podcast is probably more general, could you explain the difference between the different types of powerlifting? Because some people don't even know like what powerlifting is. So it might be easy to start out with like, what exactly is powerlifting? And then what are the different types of powerlifting? And we'll go from there.
Sure. So powerlifting is a traditional, I guess, in a sense, sport that it's mostly an American-based sport. It is a 3-lift event. So day, I guess, you have 3 exercises that you have to complete, in which you have 3 tries in each to accomplish a big, you have 3 tries to get the most amount of weight possible, essentially.
For a single rep.
For one single rep, yes. And so you will start with a squat. And so you go for your 3 squats, and whichever one you get the most weight at is the one that you continue on the competition with to go into your bench press, same thing. And then you move into the deadlift. Again, you have 3 chances to essentially get the most amount of poundage, I guess, out of your 1 rep. And all 3 of those will go towards a total, which is your best lift from all 3. And from there, you can be ranked, or that could be, technically, like, some people will go for records, or they want to be, like the best in their weight class, or some people just want to go and just do better than they did last time. Or if it's their first competition, they just want to see what they can do because it's a nice challenge. It's you against yourself for the most part. And so it is basically just that. And then there are different layers of it. So you've got your raw, which is no equipment at all. You go in with just, I guess some federations will allow knee sleeves as raw classic, I guess.
Yeah. So that's another distinction in powerlifting, is like the difference between knee sleeves and knee wraps. So you got to understand, like, for powerlifting, I know you know this, but this is for the listeners. Yeah. There's all sorts of different like equipment that you can use as like to accommodate and assist you when you're doing these lifts. And depending on the federation and depending on the class that you're competing in, like whether it's raw or single ply or multiply, you're allowed to use like certain pieces of equipment for assistance. Like the one common one that everybody probably knows is a belt, right? Like every powerlifting league, it's considered raw. It's a misconception between some people who don't know about powerlifting that they think raw means you don't wear a belt, but you wear a lifting belt even in raw powerlifting. That's probably the most common piece of, I would call, like equipment or like accommodating device that you can use for powerlifting as a lifting belt. Other things like this include knee sleeves or knee wraps. Knee sleeves are essentially like, if you ever wore like knee pads or like almost like a knee brace, it's almost like a form of this that just slides up your leg. And then there's also these things called knee wraps that in most powerlifting federations, actually pretty much all of them that I'm aware of, knee wraps are not considered raw. That is only allowed in multiply powerlifting or single ply, right? Or equipped powerlifting in some way, where they have these really like long bands that you wrap around your knees very, very tightly to basically give you the most amount of support you can possibly have in your knees while squatting. Did I do an okay job of explaining that?
Yeah. In raw, there are like federations that will do raw classic and raw modern, but we don't have to go into too many details. I think, I don't know how.
Right. Yeah. So suffice it to say, there's different pieces of equipment, and depending on the federation and the rules and the class that you're competing in, you can use different things. Now, what's between the two ones that people always talk about is they say equipped powerlifting and raw powerlifting. What's the difference there?
So the raw is you're just technically for all 3 movements, you're just wearing a singlet, which is just a standard piece of equipment just to make sure that the judges can see your crease, like where you're hitting depth and your creases, and make sure your butt's not coming off the bench and stuff like that. Whereas in equipment, you're wearing like a supportive suit. There is a single ply and multiply division. They are categorized differently as far as records and stuff. And the single ply is literally just one layer of either poly or canvas. And like for the squat, it's a suit. So you're going to wear the suit. And for the bench, it's like a bench shirt.
So if anybody's ever used like a slingshot for bench pressing, a bench shirt is basically like an enormous slingshot.
In theory, in practice, they've got different characteristics for sure. The bench shirt will hurt a lot more.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's so, and also I guess I could add is with the geared lifting, with the equipped lifting, it's like I try to explain raw powerlifting and geared powerlifting to people by saying that it's comparing a high jump versus a pull jump. So like essentially they look the same, but in the geared lifting, you got, you know, your pole, AKA your gear. So it's going to get you a little bit more poundage out of your lifts, but it's also an entirely different technique that you're using. And it requires a lot of extra patience and practice because it's an extreme learning curve for a lot of people, I guess.
Right. So in general, in raw powerlifting, or classic, well, actually, do they call which one is classic? Is that raw, or is it because it wasn't the original? Like, which do they ever call it like which one's classic?
I mean, like this is the thing with all the federations that people have an issue with, because some of them will call classic just sleeves or naked knees, and then other ones will call classic the wraps. So like depending on the federation, I usually will say raw modern is wraps, and raw classic, like classic raw is like no knee sleeves or knee sleeves.
So suffice it to say, if you do ever compete in powerlifting, you want to read your federation rules very carefully, because what each federation allows is going to be different on these things. So even if what, like you said, one might say this is raw, but one might allow knee sleeves or one might not. And they also have restrictions with certain brands of equipment you can use too at some of them, and so on and so forth. So
yeah, if you train a certain way, I would find a federation that just accommodates to the way you're training. I mean, every federation will allow you to wear knee sleeves. So if you're new to the sport, knee sleeves, and you find that the support of the knee sleeves helps you, especially if you have any injuries or anything that you're working through, or even just like even if you just like the comfort of keeping your knees warm in training and stuff, that's totally okay. I think all federations will allow you to compete in them. So even if you sign up for the wrong thing by accident, you will be able to jump into anything like that proper category that you're supposed to be in the day of, once you get there and they realize that maybe you wrote the wrong thing on your form.
Right. And